In 1907, at the edge of the Gobi Desert, a survey team stopped where the map said the Great Wall of China should be. But there was no wall, just a low ridge of dust and salt, dissolving into the horizon. That shouldn't exist. This is the most famous wall on Earth, and in some places, it simply disappears. So what exactly have we been looking at all this time? We're told the Great Wall is obvious, massive, unbroken, a stone dragon cutting across mountains. But the closer you get, the more that image begins to fracture. In one region, it's brick. In another, compacted earth. In another, branches, sand, and silence. So, is it really a wall, or something else entirely? The first contradiction appears immediately. The Great Wall was never a single continuous structure. It was built across centuries by different dynasties, using whatever materials existed locally. That image we all know. It's real, but it's only one version. And then the record fractures again. Move west. The bricks vanish. The towers disappear. What remains is a rough spine of earth, wind, cut and fragile, stretching across terrain that should have erased it long ago. The surface looks exhausted, cracked, almost absorbing light instead of reflecting it. How does something like that survive for thousands of years? The wall is filled with human bones, workers buried inside to strengthen it. It's a story repeated so often it feels like fact. But it collapses under scrutiny. Bodies were not used as structural material. Engineers understand why. Decomposition creates weakness, not strength. So why did the story survive? Because the suffering was real. Thousands died building it. The bones exist, just not inside the wall. And then comes the first real shift. In laboratory analysis of mortar samples, researchers discovered something unexpected. Rice. Ordinary, sticky rice. That glutinous rice, when mixed with lime, creates a composite material of remarkable strength and flexibility. It even continues to harden over time. This changes everything, because now the wall isn't just massive, it's intelligent, a chemical solution disguised as architecture. But then the contradiction deepens. If the material changes, what about the purpose? We're told it was a barrier, a line of defense, a simple concept. Keep enemies out. But the archive doesn't agree. Old field reports, structural scans, and forgotten survey notes reveal subtle irregularities. Patterns in the masonry that don't quite align. Sections that appear repaired, but don't follow any logical damage pattern. And then the realization hits. They weren't repairs. They were doors. Certain sections of the wall contained concealed access points, nearly invisible from the outside, but functional from within. Now the entire concept flips. The wall wasn't just blocking movement. It was controlling it. Who could pass, when they could pass, and more importantly, who could move without being seen. That shouldn't exist in a defensive structure. Unless it wasn't just defensive. Now the contradiction gets worse. If it could open from the inside, was it ever truly a barrier? Or was it something closer to a controlled interface? A filter, a system? The map begins to change. Distances between towers, repeating placements, strategic alignment with terrain. It starts to feel intentional, designed. But patterns aren't proof, because the archive is broken. Newspapers describe lost sections that were never lost. Inventory numbers in storage logs don't match the photographs. Crates sit in museum basements labeled with questions instead of answers. The missing file becomes part of the pattern. But missing doesn't mean hidden. Sometimes it just means lost. And still, the contradictions keep building until another reversal appears, this time on the surface itself. For decades, dark crusts covering parts of the wall were treated as decay, contamination, something to be removed. Clean it, restore it, erase it. But when samples reached the lab, everything changed. These dark layers are biological soil crusts, complex ecosystems of microorganisms that bind the surface together and protect it from erosion. They don't destroy the wall. They preserve it. This changes everything again. What looked like damage was protection. The wall wasn't just resisting nature, it was cooperating with it, adapting, evolving, almost like a living system. And then the structure expands beyond stone entirely. Because the wall wasn't just physical, it was informational. Beacon towers stretched across vast distances, forming a network. Fire by night, smoke by day. Signals rising fast, sharp, dark columns cutting into the sky. These systems could transmit warnings across hundreds of kilometers in hours. One signal ignites, then another, a chain reaction across mountains and deserts. That's not just defense, that's coordination, a nervous system stretched across an empire. And then something else appears in the record, scattered references to signal codes, not just warnings, but information, numbers, scale, movement. Different patterns of smoke or light could indicate the size of an approaching force. One column, two, three, each with meaning, not just enemy detected, but enemy measured. That shouldn't exist in something we think of as ancient, unless we've underestimated it, because now the wall isn't just reacting, it's processing, and then everything breaks. Because if the system was this advanced, why did it fail? History gives an answer that feels almost too simple. The wall was not breached by force alone, but by human decisions. Gates opened, deals made, commanders compromised, soldiers abandoned by the system they were meant to defend. The wall could resist armies, but it couldn't resist people. And that changes everything. The greatest barrier ever built wasn't destroyed, it was bypassed. Not with weapons, with choice. And then one final detail emerges from the archive. Maintenance logs, reconstruction cycles, sections built, abandoned, rebuilt again. The wall was never finished, not once. That shouldn't happen to something designed to be permanent, unless permanence was never the goal. Because the wall was never a solution, it was a response, a system reacting to pressure, to movement, to fear, constantly adjusting, never complete. And maybe that's the part we missed. We keep looking at the wall as an object, but it behaves like a process. So what is the Great Wall really? Not a single wall, not a single purpose, not a single truth. What we know, it was a complex, adaptive system, built from different materials across different regions, combining engineering, chemistry, and communication. What remains plausible, there are still gaps. Missing records, misidentified structures, sections that don't fully align with our current understanding. The archive is incomplete. What is likely myth? That it's visible from space as a unique object. That bones strengthened it. That it was an impenetrable, perfect defense. Those ideas survive because they are simple. But the truth isn't simple. The Great Wall is a contradiction, a barrier that could open, a ruin that adapts, a structure that behaves less like a wall and more like a system. Millions of people walk along it today, different languages, different histories, same reaction, because in the end, the wall didn't just protect a civilization, it exposed it, the strength, the innovation, the fear, and the flaw. The wall didn't fail because it was weak, it failed because it was human. And maybe that's the final realization, not hidden, not broken, just never what we thought it was.